My mother waited until the turkey was carved, the rolls were passed, and every single one of the 30 relatives crammed into her ranch house had a full plate before she decided to ruin Christmas. She stood at the head of the table, tapped her fork against her wine glass, the good wine glass, the one she only used when she wanted people to pay attention, and said, "Before dessert, there's something we need to discuss as a family." I was sitting between my grandma June and my cousin Derek, still chewing a bite of sweet potato casserole. I remember that detail because I never finished it. What she said next would have been bad enough in private. She said it in front of 30 people on Christmas Day, with paper plates and plastic forks and my homemade turkey still steaming on the table. And what my father said after was worse. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. I'm Paige, and I'm 33. This is the story of the Christmas my mother gave me an ultimatum in front of the entire family, and the 122 calls that followed in a single day. If you've ever been the one everyone expects to fix things, the one they call at 3 in the morning but forget to invite to brunch, stay with me. Drop a comment and subscribe. To make sense of that Christmas, I need to take you back to Sanford, North Carolina, small town, 30 minutes south of Raleigh. I grew up in a 1,400-square-foot ranch house on Carthage Street with a chain-link fence and a dogwood tree in the front yard that bloomed every April like it was trying to make up for the rest of the neighborhood. My father, Gene Owens, drove a plumbing truck for the local union. Left at 6, back by 5, hands smelling like copper and PVC cement. My mother, Vicky, worked the register at a fabric store on Main Street. She could tell you the thread count of any bolt of cloth within 3 seconds. Impressive skill, not a high salary. We weren't poor. We had food, heat, a used minivan that ran. But there was no extra. No vacations, no summer camps, no braces for my teeth until I was 15, and a payment plan appeared. What we did have was my mother's refrain. She said it the way other mothers said, "Brush your teeth." Constant, automatic, bone deep. One day, my girls will have the wedding I never had. Here's what she meant. Vicky married Gene when she was 19. Courthouse ceremony, a Tuesday in March. She wore a navy dress she'd worn to work the day before. No flowers, no photographer, no reception. Gene's mother didn't come because she disapproved. Vicky's parents came but left right after to get back to the farm. I found the photos once, in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, underneath a phone book and a heating pad. 2 Polaroids. She looked young and scared and a little hopeful. Gene looked like he'd borrowed his tie from someone taller. 38 years. She carried that courthouse wedding like a stone in her shoe for 38 years. And she decided, somewhere deep in the architecture of her resentment, that her daughters would fix it. I became a nurse. Not because anyone in my family told me to. Nobody in my family had gone to college. But because I watched a paramedic restart a kid's heart at a gas station parking lot when I was 16 and thought, I want to be able to do that. East Carolina University, 4 years, worked the night shift at a Citgo off Highway 70 to pay for books. Graduated, passed the NCLEX, got hired at WakeMed Hospital in Raleigh. ICU. The unit where people are either getting better or they're not, and you find out on your shift. I loved it. I was good at it. I was also, without noticing, becoming the family fixer. It happened the way most traps happen, one small yes at a time. Mom's blood pressure medication needed picking up every month from the CVS in Sanford because she refused to switch pharmacies. I did it. 6 years, 72 trips. Dad needed his taxes done. I taught myself TurboTax and filed them every April. 9 years. Saved him roughly $7,200 in accounting fees he would never have paid anyway because he would have just not filed. Grandma June, my father's mother, 81, sharp mind, bad hip, lived in an assisted living facility in Sanford. I was her emergency contact. 3 times last year, I drove 45 minutes at 3 in the morning because she'd fallen or her oxygen alarm went off. I organized every holiday, every Thanksgiving turkey, every Christmas ham, every Easter egg hunt for the cousins' kids. I ended a 2-year relationship during COVID because I chose 12-hour ICU shifts over dinner dates, and Marcus got tired of eating alone. I was 33, single, solvent, and the most reliable person in a family that had started to confuse reliability with obligation. My sister Brooke was 6 years younger than me and lived in a different solar system. Not a bad one, just different. She was 27, pretty in that effortless way that made strangers offer to carry her groceries, and she worked at a women's boutique in Raleigh called Clover and Sage. She sold linen pants and candles that cost $42. She was close to Mom in the way I never was. They spoke every day, texted about reality TV, went to the fabric store together on Saturdays. I wasn't jealous. I was an ICU nurse. I didn't have time to be jealous, and I didn't have the energy to pretend linen pants were interesting. Then Brooke met Tyler Brennan. Tyler was 29, quiet, wore baseball caps, drove a truck that was too clean to have ever hauled anything. His family owned Brennan Motors, 4 auto dealerships across central North Carolina. The kind of money that doesn't shout. Tom and Lorraine Brennan were warm people. They welcomed Brooke like she'd always been part of the family. Dinners at their lake house, a standing invitation to Sunday brunch. When Tyler proposed, a Saturday in April, their favorite hiking trail, a ring that caught the light like it had its own electricity, Vicky cried. Not just happy tears, something deeper, something that had been building for 38 years. I watched her face at the engagement party the Brennans hosted at their home, and I saw it. The moment she stopped seeing Brooke's wedding as Brooke's wedding and started seeing it as her own. The do-over, the correction, the proof that her life hadn't been wasted on a courthouse Tuesday in a Navy work dress. I should have paid closer attention to that look. But I was busy refilling the punch bowl, because that's what I did. The wedding plan materialized like weather, slowly, then all at once. By August, my mother had assembled a binder, 3 inches thick, color-coded tabs. She showed it to me over Labor Day weekend like a general presenting a battle plan, and the numbers hit me one line at a time. Venue, a restored barn outside Chapel Hill with Edison bulbs and a ceremony meadow, $28,000. Florals, peonies, garden roses, trailing greenery for every table and the arbor, $12,000. A live band, not a DJ, because Vicky had heard a DJ at a cousin's wedding in 2019 and declared it cheap, $8,500. Brooke's gown from a bridal salon in Durham, $6,200. Photography and videography, both. Because what's the point of having the wedding Vicky never had if you don't capture every angle? $9,000. Catering for 200 guests at $90 a head, $18,000. Custom invitations, linen napkins, table runners, signage, a calligrapher for the seating chart, $5,300. Hair and makeup for the bridal party of 6, $3,500. Miscellaneous, alterations, tips, transportation, hotel room blocks, $2,500. Grand total, $93,000. I stared at the number. The average American wedding in 2025 cost $34,200. This was nearly 3 times that. Where's the money coming from? I asked. It was the only reasonable question. Dad and Mom had saved $15,000. Gene told me that himself, quietly, while Vicky was in the kitchen. 15 from 93 left a gap of $78,000. Nobody said who was supposed to fill it. Nobody said anything at all. Just smiles and binder tabs and the silent assumption that someone would handle it. Someone always did. September. Labor Day weekend. I drove down to Sanford for the cookout because that's what I did. Showed up, brought potato salad, helped Jean clean the grill. The house smelled like charcoal and bug spray and whatever floral plug-in Vicky had found on sale. Normal. Except it wasn't. The hints started small, the way termites start small. Over burgers. Paige, did you know ICU nurses in Charlotte make almost $90,000? During dessert, the whole family's going to pitch in. That's how families work. Everybody gives what they can. While I was washing dishes, because I was always washing dishes, Vicky leaned against the counter and said casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "You've always been so good with money, Paige. No debt, no mortgage. That's smart. That means you have flexibility." I didn't answer. I kept scrubbing the casserole dish and let the faucet run loud. Jean was in the living room, recliner, football on, and as I walked past him to leave, he patted my arm and said, "Your mother's got big plans. She's excited." His voice had that careful flatness I'd learned to recognize. The voice he used when he agreed with Vicky, not because he believed her, but because disagreeing cost more energy than he had. I drove the 45 minutes back to Raleigh that night, telling myself I was reading into things. Vicky was enthusiastic. She'd always been enthusiastic about weddings. This was her dream, not a scheme. I was overthinking it. I was an ICU nurse. I looked for problems the way other people looked for parking spots. I told myself to relax. I remember the exact stretch of I-40 where I almost convinced myself. Almost. Because somewhere underneath the rationalizing, I knew. I just wasn't ready to know it yet. Thanksgiving. The Owens family tradition. Too much food, not enough chairs, and the slow reveal of whatever drama had been simmering since the last holiday. This year, Brooke brought her laptop to show venue photos during pie. The barn looked beautiful. Warm wood, fairy lights, a stone fireplace. Everyone oohed. I said it was lovely because it was. Then, during cleanup, Brooke cornered me in the kitchen. I was rinsing the gravy boat. She was leaning against the fridge with her arms crossed, and she had that look. The one she got when she wanted something, and had already decided she deserved it. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Tyler's parents offered to pay for the wedding. The whole thing." I set the gravy boat in the rack. "And?" "Mom said no." I turned off the faucet. "She told Tyler's parents that the Owens family handles its own. She said we didn't need outside help." "What does that mean for me, Brooke?" She didn't flinch. I'll give her that. She looked me dead in the face and said, "You make good money, Paige, and you don't have a husband or kids to spend it on. It's just math." Just math. Like my life was a column of numbers that added up to available. Like the absence of a husband and children wasn't a series of choices I'd made, sacrifices I'd made, but a convenient vacancy. A spare room in a house that existed for other people's furniture. I set the dish towel on the counter. I didn't fold it. I didn't throw it. I just set it down, picked up my keys from the hook by the door, and walked out. I drove back to Raleigh that night without saying goodbye to anyone. Brooke texted at 11. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't answer. December hit like a freight train. ICU was brutal. Flu season, RSV, a staffing shortage that turned 12-hour shifts into 14. I worked Christmas Eve day, coded a patient at 3 in the morning, lost another at 5. By the time I clocked out, my scrub smelled like hand sanitizer and failure. Jean called that week. Careful voice, rehearsed words. "Your mother's planning something special for Christmas. She wants everyone there, all 30 of us. It's important to her, Paige." I said I'd come. Of course I'd come. That's what I did. I bought gifts for everyone. I spent 2 days off wrapping them at my kitchen table in Raleigh with a glass of wine and Bing Crosby playing because I was sentimental about Christmas even when Christmas wasn't sentimental about me. Cashmere scarf for Mom. Sage green, her favorite color. $84 from Nordstrom Rack. Ratchet set for Dad. DeWalt. The nice one. Because his old set was missing 3 sockets. Pearl necklace for Brooke. Not real pearls, but good ones. With a card that said, "For the bride," because despite everything she'd said in that kitchen, she was still my sister. Oatmeal raisin cookies for Grandma June. Baked from scratch. Her recipe. Double batch in a tin I'd painted myself. I loaded the car Christmas Eve. Turkey in the cooler. 22 pounds. Brined overnight. Green bean casserole in a glass dish on the passenger seat. Cranberry sauce, homemade. Sweet tea, 2 gallons. I drove 45 minutes to Sanford in the dark, singing along to the radio, carrying food and gifts into a house where 30 people were waiting. I didn't know I was wrapping presents for people who were preparing an ambush. I didn't know I was brining a turkey for my own firing squad. Christmas Day. The ranch house was loud, hot, and decorated within an inch of its life. Vicky had outdone herself. Garland on the banister, a wreath on every door, a 6-foot Douglas fir in the corner strung with lights, and the ornaments we'd made as kids. 30 relatives packed into a house built for maybe 12. Folding tables set end to end through the living room and into the hallway. Paper plates, plastic cups, the good wine glasses for the adults. Kids running, dogs barking, Uncle Harold telling the same story about the fish he caught in 1994. I did what I always did. Set the turkey on the table, heated the casserole, poured wine for the aunts, made sure Grandma June had a chair with a cushion and a clear path to the bathroom, refilled the sweet tea pitcher twice. Nobody asked me to. Nobody needed to. There was an undercurrent, though. I felt it the way you feel a change in barometric pressure before a storm. Nothing visible, just a heaviness. Vicky kept exchanging glances with Jean across the table. Quick looks, loaded. Jean would nod slightly, then look away. Brooke was dressed up more than usual. Nice blouse, curled hair, fresh manicure. She was fidgeting with her engagement ring, spinning it. Tyler sat beside her, quiet. He had the look of someone who'd been told to be somewhere but hadn't been told why. His knee bounced under the table. He barely ate. Vicky barely ate either. She kept looking at the clock on the wall above the TV. 8 minutes past 6, 12 minutes, 15. She was waiting for something. Or more accurately, she was waiting for everyone to finish eating so she could start whatever she'd been planning since November. Maybe longer. Probably longer. The plates were mostly cleared. Vicky's pecan pie sat on the counter, uncut. She stood, smoothed her blouse, picked up her fork and tapped it against the wine glass. 3 sharp clinks that cut through the noise like a scalpel. The room went quiet in layers. Kids first, then adults. Uncle Harold stopped mid-sentence. Grandma June looked up from her plate. "Before we have pie," Vicky said, "there's a family matter I need to bring up." She smiled. The kind of smile that's rehearsed so many times it's lost its warmth. She looked directly at me. "As y'all know, Brooke and Tyler are getting married in June. Jean and I have been planning something beautiful. We've saved $15,000, and it's a start, but we need the family to come together." She paused, took a breath, and dropped the number like a grenade. "The total cost is $93,000. We're asking Paige to help cover the rest." 30 faces turned toward me. Forks stopped. I could hear the Christmas tree lights buzzing. "You're asking me," I said, slow, making sure I had it right, "to pay $78,000 for Brooke's wedding?" "I'm not asking," Vicky said. Her voice rose, her chin lifted. She had the look of a woman who'd convinced herself that volume was the same thing as righteousness. "This is family, Paige. This is what family does." She looked around the room, gathering witnesses the way a lawyer gathers jury members, and then she said the words I would hear in my sleep for the next 6 months. "Pay for your sister's wedding or consider yourself cut off forever." She said it loud. She said it clear. And she said it in front of every person I'd ever shared a Thanksgiving with. The silence after my mother's ultimatum lasted exactly long enough for me to look at my father. Jean was sitting at the other end of the table, and when Vicky finished, he did something I will never forget. He half stood. Not all the way, just enough to plant his palms on the table and push himself up so that everyone could see him, so that his voice carried over the paper plates and the plastic cups and the leftover turkey. He looked around the room, slowly, making eye contact with aunts, uncles, cousins, daring them. Then he looked at me. "Your mother and I discussed this," he said. His voice was flat, steady, practiced, a voice that had been rehearsed in a bedroom mirror. "Nobody here disagrees. This is your responsibility." Nobody here disagrees. A single sentence that turned 30 relatives into a jury. One short declaration that made their silence into a verdict. I looked around the room. Aunt Donna stared at her lap. Uncle Harold studied his fork like it held the secrets of the universe. My cousin Derek suddenly found the Christmas tree fascinating. Nobody spoke. Nobody objected. Nobody said, "Now hold on, Vicky, that's not fair." Grandma June was in her wheelchair by the window. I saw her grip the armrest. Her jaw went tight. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Fury, maybe, or sorrow. But she didn't speak. She was 81 years old and afraid of her daughter-in-law. And I understood that because everyone in that room was afraid of my mother. Brooke held Tyler's hand under the table. Tyler's face had gone white. His lips were pressed together. He hadn't known. I could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders. He was hearing this for the first time, same as me. The silence stretched like a rubber band, and I could feel it about to snap. I stood up, slowly, the way you stand when you want people to watch. I picked up my napkin, folded it once, and set it beside my plate. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't explain why $78,000 was impossible, or why the request was obscene, or why my own mother had just humiliated me in front of every person whose name I'd written on a Christmas card 2 weeks ago. I said it once. No. It came out quiet, firm. The kind of quiet that fills a room more than shouting ever could. I pushed my chair back, picked up my purse from the floor, walked to the hook by the front door and took my coat. The same coat I'd worn when I carried the 22-pound turkey in 4 hours earlier. Nobody moved. Nobody followed. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes on my back as I opened the screen door. The hinges creaked. Cold air hit my face. December in North Carolina isn't brutal, but it's sharp. And that night it was 38 degrees, and the Christmas lights on the porch were blinking red and green in a pattern that suddenly seemed obscene. I got in my car, sat there for 2 minutes. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition. I gripped the steering wheel and breathed the way I taught panicking patients to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. The turkey was still on the table. My gifts were still under the tree. The cashmere scarf, the ratchet set, the pearl necklace, the oatmeal cookies in the hand-painted tin. I'd driven 45 minutes to bring food and love into that house, and I was leaving with nothing but my coat and the word no still vibrating in my chest. I drove back to Raleigh in the dark. I cried the whole way. I did not pull over. She stood up in front of 30 relatives and said no. One word. If you know what it costs to say that word to your own mother, if you've ever walked out of a room full of people who were supposed to love you, type "I know" in the comments. Because what happened next wasn't silence. It was a flood. And it started before I even made it home. The calls started before I crossed the Wake County line. My phone lit up on the passenger seat like a small, furious bonfire. By the time I parked at my apartment in Raleigh, 45 minutes after leaving that table, I had 14 missed calls. 4 from Mom, 3 from Dad, 2 from Brooke, 1 from Aunt Donna, 4 from numbers I didn't recognize. Relatives, probably. Recruited to the cause before the pecan pie was even served. Day 1 after Christmas. Mom called 6 times. Dad called 3. Brooke twice. Aunt Donna once. 2 more unknowns. 14 calls total. Day 2, 47. Day 3, 63. Day 4, 89. Day 5, 94. Day 6, 108. By day 7, New Year's Day, 122 calls in a single day. I know the exact numbers because I logged every one. I see you have it. When you work in intensive care, you document everything, every medication, every vital sign, every change in condition. I had a spiral notebook on my kitchen counter, the same kind I used for patient notes, and I wrote down every call, every voicemail, every text, date, time, caller, duration. The voicemails were their own category. 54 total by the end of the first week. Mom's evolved fastest. Day 1, fury. You embarrassed this family, Paige. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Day 2, guilt. I raised you better than this. Day 3, ultimatum, recycled. This is your last chance. Dads were shorter. Call your mother, Paige. This isn't going away. She's not eating. Brooks were crying, just crying and silence, and then a click. Aunt Donna left one. Paige, honey, just call them back. This can be worked out. It couldn't. But Donna didn't know that yet. 3 days after Christmas. 122 calls logged. I was sitting on my couch in sweatpants eating cereal out of the box when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't expect. Lorraine Brennan, Tyler's mother. Paige, I heard there's been some difficulty. Could we have coffee? Just us. No agenda. I almost didn't go, but Lorraine had always been kind to me, genuinely kind, not the performative kind that disappears when it's inconvenient, and something in the way she phrased it told me she knew more than she was letting on. We met at a cafe in Cary. Neutral ground. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 lattes ordered. She looked uncomfortable. Not guilty. Confused. Paige, I need to show you something, she said. She unlocked her phone and turned the screen toward me. It was an email chain. 2 messages. The first was from Lorraine to my mother, sent October 28th. Dear Vicky, Tom and I would be honored to host the wedding for Brooke and Tyler. Please let us take care of the costs as our gift to the kids. We want this to be a joyful time for everyone. The second was my mother's reply, sent November 3rd. 6 days later, from vicky.owens.sanford@gmail.com. Thank you for the generous offer, but the Owens family handles our own celebrations. Paige will be helping us with the costs. No need for outside involvement. I read it twice, then a third time, November 3rd, 6 weeks before Christmas. My mother had already decided I would pay. She just hadn't told me yet. She'd announced it to strangers, to the groom's family, to people I'd never spoken to about my finances, 6 weeks before she stood at that table and delivered her ultimatum. I sat in the cafe parking lot for 20 minutes after Lorraine left, engine off, phone in my lap, open to the screenshot I'd taken of that email. I read it again. Paige will be helping us with the costs. Not might. Not. We're planning to ask. Will be. Present tense. Done deal. My mother had committed my money, my $76,000 a year, my 12-hour shifts, my missed holidays and skipped vacations and $2 coffees, to someone else's wedding without asking me. She'd announced it to Tyler's parents like confirming a catering order, and the rejection itself. That was the part that kept turning over in my head like a gear that wouldn't stop. Lorraine and Tom had offered to cover everything. $93,000, a gift, no strings, the kind of generosity that most families would fall over themselves to accept. And Vicky said no. Not because she was proud in some noble, self-reliant way. If it had been pride, she would have scaled the wedding down to what she and Jean could afford. $15,000 buys a nice wedding, a beautiful one even. But she didn't want nice. She wanted $93,000 of proof that her life had been worth something, and she wanted to control every detail. That's what the refusal was about. Control. If the Brennans paid, the Brennans got a say. If Paige paid, Vicky kept everything. The venue, the flowers, the guest list, the story. No need for outside involvement. She called the groom's own parents, the family her daughter was marrying into. Outside. I screenshotted the email, saved it to my phone, emailed it to myself, saved it to cloud storage. I see you, nurse. When the patient's chart is the only thing between the truth and a lawsuit, you learn to document everything. Twice. The calls didn't stop. They changed shape. The way a storm changes shape. Same energy, different destruction. Days 8 through 10, 94, 108, 122. The voicemails evolved. Vicky shifted from fury to pleading, which was somehow worse, because fury I could handle. I'd been handling it my whole life, but my mother's voice breaking on a voicemail at 11 at night saying, "Don't throw your family away over money, Paige," made me sit on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and stare at the ceiling. Jean's messages got shorter and more desperate. "Your mother won't eat. She's lost 4 pounds. Call her." Brooke texted once, the message that cut deepest, If you don't pay, there is no wedding. Is that what you want? As if the entire event hinged on my bank account, as if I were the villain standing between my sister and her happiness. Vicky left a voicemail on day 9 that I've listened to exactly once and will never listen to again. She recycled the exact words from Christmas dinner. Pay for your sister's wedding or consider yourself cut off forever. Except this time her voice cracked on forever, and I could hear Jean in the background saying, "Tell her, Vicky, tell her." New Year's Eve. I worked the ICU shift because single nurses without kids always work the holidays. Midnight came and went between a ventilator alarm and a medication check. During my break, I sat with a patient, a woman in her 70s recovering from a stroke. She'd been watching me all night with clear, steady eyes. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "Family stuff," I said. She nodded. Families are the people who show up, not the ones who send bills. I wrote it on a napkin and put it in my scrub pocket. Mid-January. The phone rang at 7 on a Tuesday morning, my day off, which meant I was sleeping until noon and no one could stop me. Except it was Grandma June's number, the landline at Magnolia Pines Assisted Living in Sanford. I answered because I always answered for June. "Paige." Her voice was thin but sharp, the way it always was, like a wire pulled tight. "Don't hang up." I wasn't going to hang up, Grandma. "Good. Because I need to say something and I've been practicing it for 3 weeks, and if I don't say it now, I'll lose my nerve." I sat up in bed, pulled the blanket around my shoulders, waited. "I didn't say anything at that dinner," she said. "I sat there in my wheelchair and watched your mother humiliate you and I didn't say one word. I was afraid of her. I've been afraid of her for 30 years and I'm ashamed of that." I could hear her breathing. "But you did the right thing, Paige. You hear me? You did the right thing. Your mother's afraid of losing control. She's been afraid of that since the day she married your father in that courthouse and decided the world owed her a do-over. Don't let her make you small to keep herself big." I broke. I'm not someone who cries easily. ICU will train that out of you fast. But I broke. Ugly, heaving sobs that came from somewhere below my ribs. Somewhere I'd been keeping everything locked since Christmas night. June waited. She didn't say, "It's okay," or "Don't cry." She just breathed on the other end of the line, steady as a heartbeat. When I was done, she said one thing. "When this is over, come visit me. Bring cookies." "What kind?" "The oatmeal ones. You know that." I promised. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for 10 minutes and let the quiet hold me. Second week of January. The calls had tapered. 30, 40 a day. Still too many, but the desperate edge was fading. Less fury, more exhaustion. Like a siege that had run out of ammunition but hadn't surrendered. I had 54 saved voicemails in a folder on my phone labeled documentation. I had a spiral notebook with every call logged, date, time, caller, duration, content summary. I had a screenshot of an email from vicky.owens.sanford@gmail.com that nobody in my family knew I'd seen. I made 3 decisions during a night shift between checking vitals on a patient in bed 4 and restocking the supply closet. 1. I would not pay for the wedding. That was non-negotiable. It had been non-negotiable since the word no left my mouth on Christmas Day, and no amount of voicemails would change it. 2. I would not go permanent no contact. My mother had wounded me. My father had failed me. My sister had reduced me to an equation. But they were my family, and I was not ready to lose them forever, and I was not going to let one terrible night at a folding table define the rest of my life. 3. I would wait for the right moment. I was an ICU nurse. I knew that timing was the difference between a medication saving a life and stopping a heart. The right words at the wrong time were just noise. I texted Aunt Donna. "If the family wants a real conversation, not another ambush, I'll come. Same group. Same people who were at Christmas." Donna replied in 11 minutes. "I'll make it happen." I called Lorraine Brennan, asked her to forward me the original email chain. She did. I printed it at the nurse's station at 3 in the morning. folded the paper in thirds, put it in my scrub pocket. I didn't know exactly when I'd use it, but I was ready. 30 relatives watched me walk out at Christmas. 30 relatives were going to watch what happened next. If you've ever waited for the right moment to speak your truth, if you've ever saved every voicemail because you knew someday the record would matter, type "keep going" in the comments. Because I didn't just go back to face my family. I went back with an email they didn't know existed. 3rd Saturday of January. Aunt Donna had booked the fellowship hall at Sanford Community Baptist Church. Neutral ground. Nobody's house, nobody's territory. Just a big room with linoleum floors and fluorescent lights, and a cross on the wall that looked like it had seen plenty of family arguments and wasn't impressed by any of them. Folding chairs arranged in a rough circle. A chili pot on the counter next to a sleeve of styrofoam cups, and a coffee maker that looked older than me. 30 relatives. Same cast as Christmas, minus the kids. This was adults only. Vicky and Jean sat on one side of the circle, shoulder to shoulder. Vicky's posture was rigid, chin up, lips pressed together. A woman preparing to be proven right. Jean sat slightly behind her, the way he always did. Brooke was next to them, no Tyler. This was Owen's family only. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying before she got there. Aunt Donna stood by the coffee maker, playing host, trying to manage the tension with caffeine and chili. Grandma June was wheeled in by one of the assisted living aides, who parked her chair by the door and left. June positioned herself deliberately, near the exit, where she could see everyone. I walked in last. Deliberate. I was wearing scrubs. Dark blue, WakeMed logo on the pocket. I'd come straight from a 12-hour shift. I hadn't changed on purpose. I wanted every person in that room to see exactly where I'd been while they were at home composing voicemails. I wanted them to see the version of me that showed up. The one who worked through the night, who kept people alive, who carried the smell of hospital hand sanitizer and exhaustion. I sat down. Phone in my right pocket. Folded paper in my left scrub pocket. I was ready. Donna opened. She stood in the center of the circle, hands clasped in front of her, speaking in that careful voice she used when she was trying to prevent something from catching fire. We're all here because this family is hurting. Nobody's the enemy. We're going to talk this through, and we're going to listen. She barely got the last word out before Vicky cut her off. There's nothing to talk through. Vicky didn't stand yet, but she leaned forward in her chair with the energy of someone about to. Paige knows what she needs to do. She's known since Christmas. We've called, we've texted, we've begged. She walked out of her own family's Christmas dinner and hasn't spoken to any of us in almost a month. She looked at me. All you have to do is say yes, Paige. That's all. Say yes, and this is over. I didn't say anything. I sat in my folding chair with my hands on my knees and my scrubs still smelling like antiseptic, and I let her words land in the middle of the circle and lie there. A church fellowship hall on a Saturday afternoon. Fluorescent lights humming. Chili cooling on the counter. 30 people in folding chairs who'd driven from Sanford and Raleigh and Fayetteville, and as far as Wilmington because Donna had told them this mattered. My phone in my right pocket with 54 voicemails. My folded paper in my left pocket with the truth. I had done ICU shifts where 3 patients coded within an hour, alarms screaming, doctors shouting, medications drawn up and pushed in the span of 45 seconds. A church hall with bad lighting and a chili pot was not going to rattle me. I met my mother's eyes. I didn't blink. I waited. Let her spend her ammunition first. Vicky stood. She'd been waiting for this moment. You could see it in how she rose, how she smoothed her shirt, how she took a breath and addressed the room like a woman making a closing argument she'd rehearsed in the bathroom mirror for a month. I need y'all to understand something, she said. I never had a real wedding. I married Jean at a courthouse on a Tuesday in a dress I'd worn to work the day before. No flowers, no photographer, no first dance. My mother-in-law didn't even come. She looked around the circle. Some of the older aunts nodded. One wiped her eye. Vicky's voice thickened. I swore my daughters would have better. I swore they would have the wedding I never got. And now Brooke has that chance. She turned to me. Paige makes more money than Jean and I combined. She has no mortgage, no children, no husband. She has the money. She let that sit. Then she said the word that changed the temperature of the room. She's choosing to let her sister suffer. That's selfish. Selfish. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into a still pond, and the ripples went everywhere. I watched it land on the faces around the circle. The slight flinch from Aunt Donna, the uncomfortable shift from Uncle Harold, the way Brooke's eyes widened just slightly because even she could feel that the word was a step too far. My mother had just called me selfish in front of 30 people for the second time in a month. The first time I walked out. This time I stayed, because this time I had something in my left pocket that changed everything. I kept my hands on my knees. I kept my breathing even. I let selfish sit in the room and waited for it to stop echoing. I let 5 seconds pass after selfish before I spoke. 5 seconds is a long time in a quiet room. Then I opened my mouth, and I did something I had never done before in my life. I told my family exactly what I did for them. Not to guilt them, not to score points, because they genuinely didn't know. That's the thing about being the fixer. Nobody tracks the fixing. I'm going to tell you what I do for this family, I said. My voice was calm. My hands were still on my knees. Mom's blood pressure medication. I've been picking it up from the CVS in Sanford every month for 6 years. 72 trips, 45 minutes each way. Nobody asked me to stop. I looked at Jean. Dad's taxes. I've been filing them for 9 years. Taught myself the software, did the forms, caught a $1,200 deduction in 2021 that he would have missed. Total saved over 9 years. Roughly $7,200. I looked at the circle. Grandma June's emergency contact. 3 in the morning calls, 3 times last year alone. 45-minute drives in the dark. I held her hand at the hospital when she fractured her hip. I signed the paperwork. Donna's eyes were wet. Harold stared at his shoes. Every Christmas for the last 7 years. Organized by me, turkey bought by me, casserole made by me, paper plates, plastic cups, sweet tea. All me. I paused. Let the list breathe. Including this past Christmas, the one where Mom stood up and told me to pay $78,000 or lose my family. The turkey on that table? I brined it overnight. The green bean casserole? My recipe. I drove 45 minutes on Christmas Eve to cook half that dinner. I looked at Vicky. You delivered an ultimatum over a meal I made. The room was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. Heavy quiet. The kind where people are hearing something they should have heard a long time ago. I continued. Same tone. Same posture. I make $76,000 a year. That sounds like a lot until you subtract federal and state taxes, Social Security, Medicare. Take home is about $52,000. My rent in Raleigh is $14,400 a year. Student loans, because nobody in this family helped pay for nursing school, $4,200. Car payment and insurance, $3,600. Groceries, utilities, phone, gas for the 45-minute drives to Sanford that nobody asks me to make, but everybody expects. Another $9,000. Grandma June's supplemental care items that her insurance doesn't cover, about $7,800 over the last 2 years. I did the math out loud because I wanted them to hear it. After everything, I have about $1,100 left each month. No vacation fund, no savings cushion, no dentist in 2 years because the copay is $80, and $80 is the difference between filling my gas tank and not. I looked at Brooke. You told me at Thanksgiving that I don't have anyone to spend money on, that I don't have a husband or kids. You said it was just math. Brooke's face went red. She looked at her lap. You're right, I said. I don't have a husband or kids, because I ended a relationship during COVID so I could work double shifts in the ICU. Because I spend my weekends driving to Sanford to pick up prescriptions and file taxes and check on Grandma. Because I've been spending my time and my money on this family for 10 years. I paused. Jean was staring at the linoleum. Vicky opened her mouth. That's all very touching, Paige, but I'm not finished. I reached into my left scrub pocket. The paper was warm from my body heat, soft from being folded and unfolded and refolded over the past 3 weeks. I pulled it out, held it in my lap for a moment, let the room watch me unfold it, crease by crease, the way a nurse opens a chart she's already memorized but needs the room to see. Mom, I said, in late October, Tom and Lorraine Brennan sent you an email, Tyler's parents. They offered to pay for the entire wedding. The temperature in the room dropped. Not literally. The fellowship hall was 72 degrees and would stay that way. But something shifted in the air. Something tightened, and I watched it happen on my mother's face in real time. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Nothing came out. Gene's eyes widened. His whole body went rigid in the folding chair like someone had run a current through it. Brooke said, "What?" Sharp, high-pitched, a child's voice from a 27-year-old woman. I held up the paper. This is a printout of the email chain. The Brennan's offer was sent October 28th. Your reply was sent November 3rd, 6 weeks before Christmas. I held it the way I would hold a lab result for a patient's family. Matter of fact, steady hand, no drama. The information was dramatic enough without my help. The room leaned forward, 30 people in folding chairs, and every single one of them shifted at the same time, creating a chorus of metallic creaks that sounded like the room itself was straining to hear. Coffee cups were forgotten. The chili was cold. Uncle Harold had his mouth open. Aunt Donna had her hand over hers. And my mother. My mother looked at that piece of paper like it was a snake coiling on the linoleum between us. I read the email aloud. I didn't rush. I didn't editorialize. I let the words do the work, the way a good nurse lets the vitals tell the story. From Lorraine Brennan to Vicki Owens, October 28th, I said, "Dear Vicki, Tom and I would be honored to host the wedding for Brooke and Tyler. Please let us take care of the costs as our gift to the kids. We want this to be a joyful time for everyone." I looked up. The room was holding its breath. 30 people, not a sound except the coffee maker gurgling in the corner. I looked back down at the paper. From Vicki Owens to Lorraine Brennan, November 3rd. I read it slowly. Thank you for the generous offer, but the Owens family handles our own celebrations. Paige will be helping us with the costs. No need for outside involvement. I folded the paper once and held it in my lap. I looked at my mother. November 3rd, Mom. 6 weeks before you stood up at Christmas dinner in front of every person in this room and told me to pay $78,000 or be cut off from my own family. I let that sit. Tyler's parents offered to cover everything, the full $93,000. A gift. No strings. The kind of thing a loving family does when their son gets engaged. My voice stayed level. And you said no. Not because you couldn't accept the help. If it were about pride, you would have scaled the wedding down to what you and Dad could afford. You said no because you wanted to control who paid. And you chose me. Without asking me. Without telling me. You announced it to strangers 6 weeks before you announced it to me. I set the paper on my knee. That's not pride, Mom. That's control. The room erupted. Not shouting. Worse. Whispers. The low, scandalized hum of 30 people recalibrating everything they thought they knew about the last month. I heard Aunt Donna's voice, clear and sharp, cut through the noise. "Vicki, is this true?" My mother stood. She was shaking. Not trembling. Shaking. The full body kind. The kind I'd seen in patients going into shock. Her hands were balled into fists at her sides. Her face was flushed from the jaw up, red spreading like a stain. "That is private family business," she shouted. "That email was between me and the Brennans, and it has nothing to do with this." I stayed seated. That was deliberate. I had learned something in 10 years of ICU work. The person standing is the one losing control. The person sitting is the one with it. "You made it family business," I said. My voice was even. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes people lean in. You made it family business when you demanded $78,000 from me in front of 30 people on Christmas Day. You made it family business when you told me to pay or be cut off forever. You made it family business when you had Dad stand up and tell the room that nobody disagrees, that this was my responsibility. I looked at Gene. He hadn't moved. Is that still your position, Dad? Nobody here disagrees? Now that you know the Brennans offered to pay the whole thing? Gene stared at the floor. The linoleum had a crack in it near his left shoe, and he studied it like it held the answer to a question he'd been dodging for 30 years. He didn't speak. His silence was the loudest thing in the room. Louder than Vicky's shouting. Louder than the whispers. Louder than the coffee maker that chose that exact moment to finish its cycle with a mechanical click. Vicky was still standing. Still shaking. Still furious. I was still sitting. Still calm. Still holding a folded piece of paper on my knee. The power in that room had shifted. And every person on every folding chair could feel it. Brooke stood. She stood so fast her folding chair scraped backward on the linoleum with a sound like a shriek. Tears were streaming down her face. Not the pretty, delicate tears she cried at movies, but the raw, ugly kind that come when the ground shifts under your feet. Tyler's parents offered to pay? She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Vicky. They offered to pay for the entire wedding and you said no? Vicky's jaw tightened. We are not charity, Brooke. It's not a handout. Brooke's voice cracked. It's Tyler's family. They're going to be my family. And you told them no? This was new. Brooke and Vicky had never faced off. Not once in 27 years. Brooke was the daughter who called every day, who texted about reality TV, who went to the fabric store on Saturdays. She was the easy one, the aligned one. And now she was standing 3 feet from our mother with mascara running down her cheeks and a look on her face I recognized. The look of someone discovering that the person they trusted most had been making decisions about their life without telling them. The circle was dead silent. Then Jean spoke. Low. Almost a whisper. The kind of voice a man uses when he's admitting something he should have admitted months ago. I knew about the email. Every head turned. He was still sitting, still staring at the linoleum. She showed me the night she wrote the reply. I told her to accept the offer. I told her it was generous and we should say yes. He paused, swallowed. She said no, and He trailed off. I was afraid of your mother. I should have said something. At the dinner, at any point. I should have been. He stopped. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. I stood. Not fast. Not angry. The way you stand when you've said most of what you came to say and there's only a little bit left. Mom. Vicky was still standing across the circle. Her arms were crossed now, locked tight against her body like armor. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. I love you, I said. I love this family. I've spent 10 years making sure everyone's taken care of. The prescriptions, the taxes, the holidays, the 3 a.m. phone calls. I've never asked for a thank you. I never expected one. I looked around the circle. But I will not be punished for saying no. I will not be harassed with 122 calls in a single day because I refuse to hand over money I don't have for a wedding that didn't need to cost $93,000 in the first place. I looked at Vicky. And I will not pay $78,000 because you're too proud to accept generosity from the family your daughter is marrying into. The Brennans aren't outsiders, Mom. They're about to be family. And you treated their kindness like an insult because accepting it meant sharing control. I picked up the folded email from the seat of my chair, refolded it along its creases, put it back in my scrub pocket. The answer was always no. I said it quietly, simply. The way you state a fact that doesn't need defending. It was no on Christmas Day. It was no during 122 calls on New Year's. It was no when I read this email in a cafe parking lot. The answer was always no. I looked at her. My mother, 57 years old, standing in a church fellowship hall in Sanford, North Carolina, with her fists clenched and her makeup smeared. You just didn't want to hear it from anyone except me. I turned toward the door, Grandma June was there in her wheelchair, exactly where she'd positioned herself when the aide wheeled her in. Near the exit where she could see the whole room. She looked up at me. Her eyes were clear. Her hands were still on her armrests, the knuckles white from how hard she'd been gripping them. She nodded. Once. Just once. A single, slow dip of her chin that carried more pride than any standing ovation I'd ever received in my life. I knelt beside her wheelchair, kissed her forehead. Her skin was cool and papery and smelled like lavender lotion and the peppermints she kept in her cardigan pocket. I'll bring cookies on Sunday, I said. Make them the oatmeal ones, she said. Don't skimp on the raisins like last time. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in a month. Aunt Donna followed me to the parking lot. The January air was cold and clean and tasted like nothing, which was a relief after the stale coffee and tension of that fellowship hall. She caught my arm by my car. Paige. She was crying. Donna was the family mediator, the smoother, the woman who brought casseroles to every crisis. And right now, she looked like someone who'd just realized that some things can't be smoothed over with a 9x13 dish. I'm sorry I didn't say anything at Christmas, she said. I should have. I didn't know what to say. You made this meeting happen, I said. You called everybody. You booked the hall. You made the chili. I looked at her. That counts, Donna. She hugged me. Tight. The kind of hug where someone's apologizing with their arms because the words aren't enough. I drove back to Raleigh. I didn't cry this time. I turned on the radio. Thought about oatmeal cookies and how many raisins constituted not skimping. 1 week later, a Tuesday evening, I was on my couch in sweatpants, eating leftover pad thai and watching a documentary about whales, which is what single ICU nurses do on their nights off, and I refused to apologize for it. My phone rang. Brooke. I almost let it go to voicemail, force of habit after 500 and change calls in 3 weeks. But something made me pick up. Her voice was different, quiet, measured. The breathless, righteous energy was gone. She sounded like someone who'd been doing a lot of thinking and not enough sleeping. Tyler and I talked to his parents, she said. They're still willing to pay. They never withdrew the offer. They just didn't want to push after Mom said no. Good, I said. Paige. A pause. A long one. I could hear her breathing. I'm sorry about what I said. At Thanksgiving. About you not having anyone to spend money on. About it being just math. She was crying again, but different tears. The quiet kind. The kind that come from shame, not frustration. It wasn't math. I was wrong. I looked at the ceiling of my apartment. There was a water stain in the corner I'd been meaning to report to maintenance for 6 months. I know, I said. Will you come to the wedding? Another pause. Mine this time. I'll think about it. I would. I knew I would go. She was still my sister, and Tyler was good, and a wedding is a beginning, not an ending. And I was not going to let my mother's pride steal one more thing from this family. But I needed Brooke to sit with the, I'll think about it, for a while. I needed her to feel the weight of waiting for an answer. Not as punishment, as education. February, a Saturday morning. My phone rang and the screen said Mom. I stared at it for 3 rings. 4. Then I picked up. Paige. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Not the commanding voice from Christmas dinner. Not the pleading voice from the voicemails. Something underneath all of that. Something original. Something that had been buried under 38 years of resentment and binder tabs and the desperate need to control the one day of her life that was supposed to be perfect. Your aunt says I need to apologize, so. A pause. I'm sorry. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd wrapped her cashmere scarf in sage green paper 6 weeks earlier. Do you understand why, Mom? Silence. A long one. The kind that tells you someone is fighting between the answer they want to give and the answer that's true. I wanted Brooke to have what I never had, she said finally. I thought you owed it to this family. I thought, because you're the strong one, because you can handle things. I thought that meant you should. I don't owe this family a wedding, Mom. My voice was steady, not cold, not warm, honest. I owe this family love, and I've been giving that for 10 years. Every prescription, every tax return, every 3 in the morning drive. You just couldn't see it because it didn't come with a price tag. She cried, not the controlled tears of a woman performing emotion. Real, ragged, ugly crying, the kind that sounds like something being pulled loose from deep inside. I never had a wedding, Paige. Her voice broke on my name. I know, Mom. I know. It wasn't enough. An apology prompted by your sister isn't the same as an apology that comes from understanding. But it was the first honest sound my mother had made in months. And sometimes a start is enough. June. The wedding. Not at the restored barn outside Chapel Hill with the Edison bulbs and the $28,000 price tag. At the Brennan Lake House, on a Saturday afternoon when the light came through the trees like something out of a painting nobody could afford. Lorraine handled everything. She didn't do it to prove a point. She did it because she was a mother who loved her son and wanted his wedding to be beautiful, which is what mothers are supposed to do. It wasn't $93,000. It was wildflowers from a local farm, arranged in mason jars by Lorraine's garden club. It was a guitarist from the church in Chapel Hill who played acoustic covers during the ceremony. It was Brooke in a consignment wedding dress that fit her like it had been waiting for her. $280, altered by a seamstress in Cary for another $60. It was real and warm and full of laughter, and it was better than anything in that 3-inch binder could have been. I was there, second row, left side, lavender dress, on sale at Belk for $42. I didn't organize anything, didn't bring a casserole, didn't set up chairs or pour wine or manage the seating chart. I just showed up. For the first time in 10 years, I just showed up. Vicky approached me at the dock during sunset. The reception was winding down, kids chasing fireflies, Tyler and Brooke dancing to something slow. She stood next to me and we looked at the water. "You look nice," she said. "Your hair's longer." Normal mother things. Small things. The kind of things that might, over time, build back into something.